One of our community members, Eric, left me a review for my book on Amazon, and it literally made me laugh out loud. He said, "David is like if Neville Goddard, Tony Robbins, and Michael Singer raised a child." Now, I'm going to assume Eric was not referring to my physical aesthetic or my looks, because if those three had a baby, it would most likely be the ugliest looking child in history. So for my own self-esteem and self-confidence, I'm going to assume he's referring to my ability as a personal growth teacher. And I'm sure you know who Tony Robbins is. Michael Singer is the best-selling author of The Untethered Soul and the Surrender Experiment, sort of a modern-day guru. And Neville Goddard was a mystical teacher in the mid-1900s who taught about the power of imagination in the fourth dimension. So this inspired me to create this episode where I'm going to break down for you self-help or personal transformation in a way that you have never heard before. I'm going to be talking about how to manage your state like Tony Robbins, how to surrender like Michael Singer, and how to create from the fourth dimension using the power of your imagination like Neville Goddard. And I'm going to put it all together with a nice little bow on top so that you can leave this episode more informed than when you came, and likely more transformed. So if you've been watching all the videos and reading all the books and you've had some improvement in your life from personal growth, but you also feel a little confused because there's so much information out there and you don't know if you should be working on your limiting beliefs, or you've got some hidden childhood trauma that's getting in the way, or whether you should be meditating on red rocks or opening your pineal gland or doing ayahuasca, just take a deep breath. I'm going to explain it to you. Okay, so let's start with the Tony Robbins model of personal growth. Now, Tony has this thing called the Triad. He says it's state, story, and strategy. If you're in the right state and you've got the right story and you've got the right strategy, you can create any results that you want. And if you're not producing the results that you want, you go back to one of those three things. You either need to change your state, tell a better story, or find a better strategy. So Tony's big on managing state. Now, I remember going to my first Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within back in December of 2014 in Dallas, Texas. My wife and I then enrolled in the Tony Robbins Platinum Partner Program and traveled the world Tony Robbins style, went to like 14 events in a year, yelling from the front row, "I'm a gladiator." And then I came home not feeling like a gladiator, right? I came home with a personal development hangover, and I was like, what in the world happened? I was so excited. I could take on the world. I had all the ideas. I felt confident in myself. I felt decisive. Where did that state go? And the answer is, well, you came home and there's no seminar there. So unless you bring 10,000 people with you jumping up and down in your kitchen every single day, you got to find a better way to sustain that state, right? And it's not practical. Using your physiology, moving, jumping to get yourself into a higher energetic state so you have better thoughts, it's fantastic, but you certainly aren't doing that in the workplace. And it's exhausting to continue to maintain it. So there's a more elegant approach where you can work with your mind and work with your emotions. And we use an approach called the 2 states of being. So I'm going to explain that to you right now. 2 states of being, and maybe you've heard me share this in other episodes, but never in tandem with surrender and creating from the fourth dimension. So stick with me. 2 states of being is this idea that there are only 2 states of being, what we call powerful states and primal states. Now, powerful states are states of being that feel good. They're states of being like joy, curiosity, calm, peace, excitement, passion. States of being that feel really, really good. And when you're in a powerful state of being, it is when your parasympathetic nervous system is active. That's the rest and the relaxation. Now, if I was going to break down achieving goals, being successful in your business, healing your body, improving your relationships, anything that you want to achieve into one distinction, it would be to operate as consistently as possible from a powerful state. Because when you're in a powerful state, that's where you have productive thoughts, you have good feeling emotions, you take productive action, you produce the results that you want. Not only that, when you're in the parasympathetic expression of your nervous system, that's when you're connected to intuition, inspiration, innovation. It's when the body is in a natural state of healing. It's where everything that you want to create is going to come from. Then there are primal states of being like boredom, anxiety, jealousy, anger, fear, frustration, stress, overwhelm. States of being that don't feel good. That's when the sympathetic expression of your nervous system is active. That's the fight, flight, freeze, or whatever other F words that they've come up with recently to describe the sympathetic expression of the nervous system. This is a very useful state of your nervous system This is the state that has helped us survive for tens of thousands of years, but it's overutilized. And what's happening right now is that as we're experiencing normal experiences throughout the course of our day, we're moving into a primal state. We're moving into the sympathetic expression of our nervous system. We're moving into fight or flight when we shouldn't. That's putting an incredible tax on our system. I believe that's one of the reasons why so many people are sick and we're experiencing this chronic health epidemic. It's also why so many people are poor. You cannot create what you want from a primal state of being. Now, what's also important to understand is that this state of being is unnecessary most of the time. I remember when I was out to dinner with my wife and I would move into a primal state just looking at the menu because I didn't have that much money back then. And I was like, oh my God, I hope that she does not order the filet mignon. I hope that she does not want a bottle of wine. We move into a primal state looking at our news feed, seeing other people living lives that we think are better than ours, even though they're not real. And comparing ourselves to other people, we move into a primal state. So all day long, we're toggling back and forth between a primal state and a powerful state. You're always in one state of being or the other, and you're never in two states of being at once. And the name of the game is to operate from a powerful state as consistently as possible. Now, what's also important to understand is that the only thing that is determining whether you are in a powerful state or a primal state is not the experience that you're having, but the meaning you're giving the experience. So if you're an entrepreneur and you have a marketing campaign that's not going the way that you had wanted it to, it's not the marketing campaign that's causing you to move into stress or frustration or fear. It's actually the meaning that you're giving the experience. And the meaning might be something like, this is never going to work out for me. What if this doesn't change soon? I'm going to run out of money. What am I doing wrong? There's something wrong with me. How come it works for other people, but it doesn't work for me? That line of internal dialogue is what's causing you to feel shitty. And that's a technical term. It's what's causing you to feel shitty. It's what's causing you to move into a primal state. And again, from a primal state, you're not resourceful. You can't solve problems. You're not healing. You're not financially abundant. You're not in the process of creating a future that you desire. Similarly, if you're at work and your manager says something to you, your manager saying something to you that might move you into some form of frustration or anger is not the cause of you moving into frustration or anger. It's the meaning you're giving the experience of what your manager said. They shouldn't have said that to me. They don't appreciate me. How come no one values me? I'm not good enough. Why do I keep making mistakes? Oh, I can never get it right. It's the thinking that's moving you into a primal state. And we know this from behavioral psychology. Behavioral psychology basically says, hey, the beliefs that you formed at a very early age, meaning what you learned from your parents or the meanings or conclusions that you came to at a very early age that have now shaped the lens through which you experience life, those beliefs now determine on a moment-by-moment basis what you think. So if you believe money is hard to make, you're not going to have thoughts of financial prosperity and financial abundance. You're going to have thoughts of financial insecurity and financial scarcity. If you learned at a very early age and developed a belief that you can't trust people, then you're going to have thoughts around, I don't know if those people are telling the truth. Maybe they're judging me. I can't really trust them. Your beliefs determine your thoughts. Your thoughts, as you have them, are actually an electrical activation of neural networks in your brain. You start to spark different networks in your brain, and then that electrical current is then translated and transmitted through your nervous system, and what you're thinking you then feel. Your beliefs determine your thoughts determine your feelings or your emotions, and the quality of the thought determines the quality of the emotion. So if you're thinking, man, this is just really going to work out for me and I cannot wait to get that job promotion, you're going to feel excited. If you're thinking to yourself that, you're going to be late and you're going to lose your job and nothing ever works out for you, you're going to feel overwhelmed. So that thought translates into an emotion that you feel, and your emotions or your feelings determine what actions you do or do not take. So if you're feeling insecure, if you're feeling like you're not good enough, if you're feeling like nobody would want to hear what you have to say, you're going to show up as a very reserved person, not expressing the things that you're thinking. If you're feeling like you're worthy and you're good enough and that people love you, you're going to be taking action to express your likability into the world. And then how you show up in the world, the actions that you take determine the results that you produce. And what's so interesting about this is that those results then reinforce the belief that they started with. So your Thoughts are actually creating your emotions. It's the meaning that you give the experience that's determining whether you're operating from a powerful state or a primal state. And again, you're always in one state of being or the other. You're never in two states of being at the same time. And if I was going to recommend one practice that could lead you to achieving your full potential and having a life that you love, relationships you love, a bank account you love, a business you love, a body you love, it would be notice when you've moved into a primal state and use whatever tools or technologies you have access to move back into a powerful state of being. Everything that you're wanting to create is going to come from a powerful state. In fact, when you're in a powerful state, you're creating future situations and scenarios that when you meet them, you will love. And when you're in a primal state, you're creating future circumstances, situations, or scenarios that when you meet them, you will react from a primal state. You're creating stressful situations into your future, fear-based situations into your future. And eventually, when you meet that situation, you'll have the same emotional reaction that actually created it. So this is a great breakdown, and it's a binary breakdown, right? What we're basically saying is, hey, you're either in a powerful state or a primal state, and the name of the game is to operate from a powerful state as consistently as possible. And the only thing that's determining whether you're in a powerful state or a primal state is your own thinking. So now, rather than needing to jump up and down to temporarily change your state, so you change your thoughts, and you feel good, which is not sustainable. Now we're working with the invisible forces. You know, I always liked Doctor Strange. He's like one of my favorite Marvel Comics characters because he was so freaking powerful. It was like he had access to these like ancient teachings and these esoteric ways. He was able to manipulate the physical world, and you're able to manipulate the physical world too. There's an elegance, right, to learning the mystic arts. These are the mystic arts. So what do we do with this information? How can we more effectively manage our state? Well, number one, you realize that it's your thinking that's determining what state of being you're in. Number two, we discovered something really, really powerful. We had over 10,000 coaching conversations with my organization, working with entrepreneurs, leaders, high performers, visionaries. And of course, even before I had built this organization, I used these same tools and technologies on myself, helping me go from a drug addict and an alcoholic and a pornography addict who was broke and purposeless and single to now living the life of my dreams. But what we discovered along the way was that as we were coaching our clients, we discovered that the thoughts that they were having that were moving them into a primal state were 100% of the time untrue. And so I'll give you an example of this. I'll say it one more time. The thoughts that you have, the meanings that you give the experiences of your life that activate a primal state, right, that cause you to not feel good, that's an indication that what you're thinking is not true. Your nervous system is kind of like a lie detector test. And anytime you're thinking something that doesn't feel good, that not feeling good is an indication that it's not true. And so a woman said to me in one of my group coaching calls, hey, I understand this two states of being, and you're saying that if you're thinking something that doesn't feel good, it's not true, that your own thoughts, your unintelligent thoughts are the only cause of me moving into a primal state. But she said, but I lost my job like 3 months ago. Like that's a fact. And so that stresses me out. What you're telling me is that it's not true that I lost my job? I'm saying no. What I'm suggesting is that you losing your job is not what is causing you to move into stress or a primal state. It's the thoughts that you're having about the lost job. So I asked her to take a look at that, and I said, when you think about the fact that you lost your job, what's the meaning you give what's the meaning that you give to that experience? And she said that I'm never going to find a new one. I said, well, if that doesn't feel good, then we know it's not true. That I'm going to run out of money. Well, if that doesn't feel good, then we know it's not true. That I'm not going to have enough. Well, if that doesn't feel good, then we know it's not true. And what we've discovered, and this is an understanding of metaphysics and field theory, is that all of life is vibration, and that there is a living structure to life. Some people call it God, some people call it Jesus or Allah or the universe. I call it higher power or intelligence. And that intelligence is always working for our greatest growth, our greatest prosperity, and our greatest evolution. So in other words, everything that's happening in our life, even if it's something that we don't expect, is working to move us towards a greater outcome, a greater expansion, more joy, more love, more prosperity. Unless, of course, it leads us to death, and then it's leading us back into the non-physical, which is also just part of the process. It doesn't mean it's a problem. And so when we are giving a meaning to the unfolding of our life in this step-by-step loving way that is anything other than in alignment with this idea that what is happening should be happening, and it's working for our greatest growth and our greatest prosperity and our greatest evolution, we align ourselves with this unintelligent thinking that there's a problem, and we experience that as dissonance in our nervous system. So the feelings that we have when we're in a primal state are an indication that what we're thinking is not true. Another way of looking at this, if we want to be a little more spiritual about this description, is that's not God's will for you. That's not the universe's will for you. Whatever you're thinking right now, the meaning you're giving it, that's not what life has intended for you. And so we use this distinction, which again, we've tested across 10,000 coaching conversations. We know it to be true, and we encourage people to start utilizing these distinctions, noticing when they've moved into a primal state, taking a look at the thinking that is causing them to move into a primal state, and entertaining the idea that that thinking is not true because it's moving them into a primal state. 100% of the time people become convinced that, wow, this is true. We actually have a guidance system inside of us, which is our nervous system and our emotions. And anytime we're thinking something that doesn't feel good, it's actually because that's not what's really happening. It's a misinterpretation of reality and what's unfolding. And so when we're looking to manage our state, utilizing this distinction, when we become aware of something that we're thinking that doesn't feel good, and we know that it's not true, now we can start to question the thinking. You know, it's really quite simple, because if you're thinking something that's not true because it doesn't feel good, then I guess what must be true is the opposite of it, right? So if you're thinking that you're not going to have enough at the end of the month, you're worried that you're not going to have enough to pay your mortgage, and that's the thought that's causing you to move into a primal state, then what must be true is that you are going to have enough. And then you can ask yourself a question. And now I'm getting into a primary tool that we teach called the decision matrix, which is, what evidence do I have for the fact that I'm going to have enough? And you might go, well, every single month I worry that I'm not going to have enough. And I always seem to make my mortgage payment. Or you could say, well, even if I can't make my mortgage payment, I still have enough. I can always crash with a friend. I can always do some extra work on the side. I might have to move into another place, but I'm not going to die. I have enough. And so we can start to work with the thinking that's occurring for us and use these frameworks to begin to question the thinking, use these systems and these structures to realign ourselves with what Buddha would call intelligent thinking, right thinking. When we're aligned with right thinking, we're almost always operating from a powerful state. And so if we want to engage in state management, which is very important, because when you're operating from parasympathetic, you're creating what you want, and you're resourceful, and you're healthy, and you're connected, and you're vibrant, and you're intuitive, and you're intelligent. When you're operating from a primal state, you're pretty much operating like an animal, right? Just out of fight or flight. We can utilize these distinctions to understand the root cause of what is causing us to move into a primal state, which is our thinking, and to begin to work with the thinking and transform the thinking. When we transform the thinking, what we're doing is we're transforming a habit of thought. And when we do that, we become a changed person. So you can jump up and down all day long, but you're not going to change your thinking. However, if you can change your thinking by applying systems and frameworks and distinctions like the 2 states of being, you don't really have to jump up and down at all unless you want to. Right? You're able to realign your thinking by realizing that anytime you're thinking something that doesn't feel good, it's not true. And therefore, the opposite must be true. Define what that opposite is and start to seek some solutions. Hey, it's David. Quick announcement before we get back to your episode. Our annual event, the Powerful Living Experience, is coming up. There's a link in the show notes, or you can visit powerfullivingexperience.com. Check out the video of last year's event. We're going to be bringing together 1,000 impact-driven entrepreneurs, leaders, and game changers to spend 3 days doing what matters most. Going really, really deep on identifying the limiting beliefs and subconscious programs that are still preventing you from your full potential, and going through deep experientials and trainings and transforming them. We're also going to be getting into concepts like wealth creation, purpose, greatness, money, relationships, health. And if you're an entrepreneur, we're going to be spending about 20% of that event opening up my business playbook, the same strategies and tactics and techniques that we use to go from $0 to $30 million in an impact-driven business, while spending 90% of my time doing what I love. There's nothing nothing like the Powerful Living Experience. Inc. named it a top 3 must-attend personal development event for entrepreneurs and leaders, and I want to see you there. We've got some discounted tickets right now, plus some additional bonuses. Again, all the information is in the link in the show notes, or you can jump on over to powerfullivingexperience.com, get registered, and I will plan on seeing you there along with 1,000 other impact-driven, incredible members of our community for 3 days that you will never forget. And now, back to your regularly scheduled episode. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again because it's super powerful. I had a private client that I was working with. He was an Egyptian Muslim guy. He was 29 years old, super successful, really rich, pretty powerful and influential, but he was miserable in his life. He was having challenges in his relationships with his family, challenges with his employees, challenges with the girls that he was dating, because he always felt insecure. And the reason for that is he came to this country at a very early age. He was a completely different type of kid. He started his first business at 11 years old, and he was different. He was Egyptian. He was Muslim. He followed a different faith than most people. And so he developed a belief system that he didn't belong. And so everywhere he went, he felt like he didn't belong. And as a result of that, he was super defensive, always posturing and compensating for his personal insecurity. So we're coaching together for a couple of months. I'm teaching him these distinctions. Hey, there's only 2 states of being. What determines what state of being you're in is your own thinking. Anytime you move into a primal state, it's caused by one thing and one thing only, which is your thinking. And the quality of the thinking is that it's not true. And so he's putting it to the road test, and he's doing a really good job. But he calls me on a Saturday and he says, hey man, I got stuck last night. I need your coaching. I said, sure. What's going on? He said, I was out Friday night. I was invited to this private party with about 15 people. They were all movers and shakers, president of the local sports team, biggest fashion designer, DJ, real estate agent, venture capitalist, you name it. It was the who's who. I said, okay, cool. So what's the problem? He said, well, while I was there, I started having a little bit of a panic attack. I was getting stressed and I moved into a primal state. I said, so what'd you do? And he said, well, I took a look at my thinking because I remember what you told me, right? The only thing that can move me into a primal state is my own thinking. I said, what'd you find? He said, well, I kind of found this thought, which is like, I don't belong here, that there must be some joke. Like all these people are super successful. I know I'm successful, but I'm not as successful as they are. And I just really felt like I got to get out of here. I don't belong here, or something like they're going to discover that I'm an imposter. I was like, okay, cool. So what'd you do? And he said, well, I remember what you said, that if I'm thinking something that doesn't feel good, it's not true. And some form of the opposite must be true. I said, okay, great. So what'd you do? He said, well, I took this idea that I had that I don't belong here, and I came up with a new belief, which was I do belong here. And then I remember you said to find some evidence for the new belief. I said, so what'd you find? He said, nothing, zero. And he said, I was panicked all night and I haven't been able to get over it. Like, I really feel like I didn't belong there and it doesn't feel good and I want to work through this. Help me. So I'd been coaching with him for a while and I understood some leverage points that I had with him. And for him, he was very strong in his faith. You don't have to be strong in a belief in God in order to create great transformation using these frameworks and this methodology. But I said, hey, let me ask you a question. I said, you're a religious guy, right? He said, yeah. I said, you believe in God? He said, yes. I said, the omnipotent, omniscient, all-knowing type of God? He said, yeah. I said, got it. So how did your God put you in a place where you didn't belong last night? And he paused, and I could hear the wheels spinning. And after a couple of seconds, he said, oh my God. I said, what? He said, I just realized something. I said, what'd you realize? He said, I realized I belong everywhere I am. I can never be in a place where I don't belong. Otherwise, I wouldn't be there, because I believe in a loving God who puts me in circumstances and situations where I belong 100% of the time. I didn't need to get him to jump up and down. This wasn't a thing that he would shift for a few minutes and then we'd have to figure out how to shift it again. This was a fundamental change in the way he perceived life and his role in it and his relationship to it. That's what transformation is. So state is very, very important. Managing your state is critical. There's only 2 states of being, but there's a way that you can manage your state by working with your thoughts and working with your emotions through a systematized framework so that you have to be constantly managing your physiology, right? It's a much more elegant way to approach state change. So that's the Tony Robbins piece of the 3-headed David Bear beast of Tony Robbins, Michael Singer, and Neville Goddard. Let's talk about Michael Singer for a second. Michael Singer wrote a book called The Surrender Experiment. I actually give that book to all of my second year high-level coaching clients. At that point in time, they're ready to start exploring surrender. And Michael is fantastic. I've listened to his podcast. I've listened to a lot of his interviews. He's kind of like a wacky hippie guy. You can see that he's clearly embodied and he's living what he teaches in terms of surrender. The challenge is that because he's experiencing it, he's like, yeah, that thinking you have, just let it go. That attachment you have, just let it go. Just surrender it. And it's like, yes, I understand that intellectually, but how do I actually do it? And what I've found, and the good news is surrender isn't something that you have to learn. Surrender is something you practice. Surrender is a skill. And the same thing with mindset and what we're talking about in terms of the two states of being and being able to manage your state. It's a skill that you develop over time. It's a new habit or a pattern that you build. It's muscles that you build, spiritual muscles. And you can do that with this concept of surrender. A lot of people I know, especially faith-based people, in particular Christians, just because I happen to know a lot of them, but also, like I said, my Muslim friends, we have many in our programs, and like the story I just told you about with my Egyptian Muslim client, they want to believe in God, and they believe in God, or they believe in a higher power that is operating in their life, but when times get tough, they cling back to control, right? The hardest time to let go and quote unquote let God is when it's something really big and really hairy and really serious. That's when we want to try to take back control. And I grew up in a family with no religion, no spirituality, no God. My dad was Jewish. My mother was Lutheran. We celebrated Passover, Easter, Hanukkah, and Christmas. We never went to church and never went to temple. And so I built a relationship with a power greater than myself in the rooms of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, because it's the first 3 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I saw in my recovery that God could do for me what I couldn't do for myself. The first 3 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous, again, these are people who have probably tried to quit drinking thousands of times, tried to quit drugging thousands of times, tried to quit sexing or pornographying or eating or being codependent thousands of times. But we've worn such a groove into our minds, into our nervous system, into our behavior, that we, in and of ourselves, have no capacity to break that pattern or habit. And so in 12-step, the first step says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. The second step is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. The third step is we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And so what we do in 12-step, or at least what I did, I can only speak about what this alcoholic and addict did, was I came up with a game plan every time I had the urge to drink or drug. I came up with a game plan every time I started to feel myself being stressed or anxious or overwhelmed by my life. And I noticed that my mind had a solution. The solution my mind had was to go drink so I could feel better, to go drug so I could feel better, to go look at pornography or act out so I could feel better. But I came up with an alternative game plan. And that game plan was to move towards spiritually enriching activities that showed my trust that if I just stopped trying to solve the problem the way I thought the problem needed to be solved and the way I was accustomed to solving the problem, that the problem would resolve itself. And not only that, but that there was actually a power greater than me, what I call my higher power. For me, it's God, that would intervene in miraculous ways to help solve the problems of my life. Because drinking and drugging wasn't my problem. My problem was that I didn't know how to emotionally handle the challenges in my life because I was controlling everything and afraid of failing and afraid of not being good enough. And that emotional discomfort of constantly feeling like I wasn't good enough and that I was failing and that things were going to go wrong wore me down. And I wanted to check out of that worn down feeling through drugs and alcohol and sex. So in 12-step, it wasn't just that I surrendered, my desire to drink to a higher power. I had to surrender everything that I had no control over. And so surrender is to step away from the problem you can't solve. But your core programming, your belief systems will compel you to try to solve it. And at some point, you realize that there's an insanity to continuing to try to approach solving the same problem the same way. My wife, and I've shared this before on this show, recently discovered that one of her core programs was control. And control and having things the way that Carol wanted them and doing things at which she had defined to be a high level was how Carol became successful in her life, or at least how she perceived she became successful in her life. But as Carol got older, and we usually see this between the ages of 35 to, I'd say, 65, but really 40 is the sweet spot, the way that you've been doing things has built up so much neurological momentum that it starts to suffocate your life. In other words, the thing that you think has contributed to the reason why you're successful or good at something starts to become the reason why your life starts to become unmanageable. And so as our company grew, Carol started applying control to more and more things. And over time, more and more things started to fall apart. And in order for Carol to let go of her control, she had to work against the psychological and logical momentum that had been built. Like this idea of letting the team make mistakes seemed absurd. Not checking every email that went out or checking every marketing automation campaign or double or triple checking work seemed like it was irresponsible. And so at some point, Carol had to say, look, I just trust that there's a higher power functioning here. And I believe that my higher power is calling me to not actually try to control more, because clearly that's not working. It's creating insanity, it's creating unmanageability, and it's creating powerlessness in my life. But what I'm really being called to is to have more faith, to have more trust, to let go more. And it turned out to be a really beautiful thing, because as Carol was willing to surrender in those moments that her mind told her she needed to double and triple and down on the old way. And she had already defined a new way, which was when I feel like I need to take more control, I step away, I spend time with the baby, I go for a walk, I go meditate, I go read something that's uplifting, I go listen to some positive audio. And I trust that when I come back, the problem will reorganize itself, or I will be in a solution-oriented state and more apt to deal with the problem as it shows up. Everything changed. So letting go is about understanding that life is always working for you, that we actually live in a system that will take over if we allow it. And we see this so often, and I'm sure you have examples in your own life. What comes to mind for me is Carol's best friend had been dating, trying to find the perfect guy. She was on like 3 different dating websites. She was swiping so much she had a callus on her index finger. She was going out on 1 date, 2 dates, sometimes 3 dates a day. And we're walking on the beach and she's complaining that like, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of coming up with ways to get out of having to kiss these guys that I'm going out on dates with that never represent really who they are in their profiles. Their pictures never look like who they actually are. Their profiles are never like who they actually are. And she said, you know what? I don't care if I'm single for the rest of my life. I am no longer going to go out on these dates. I'm not even going to try anymore. 2 weeks later, she meets the guy who's now her husband. Man of her dreams. Perfect match. And so life has a way of letting us push and hustle and grind until we exhaust ourselves, or we burn out, or we hit what we call in our addiction a bottom. We give up, and that giving up then allows life to work its magic. And it works its magic through us with new thoughts and ideas. It works its magic around us through coincidences and synchronicities. But Einstein talked about this. He said you can't solve the problem with the same frequency that created it. And so you get to a point in your life where your limiting beliefs are manufacturing problems, and you can't solve them with the same limiting belief type of thinking. That's when surrender is required. When nothing seems to be working, try doing nothing. And it seems so counterintuitive, but it starts to allow a partner into your life for creating the life or the business or the health or the relationship of your dreams, which is a higher power. So when you know that there's actually a system that we live in that's highly intelligent, that's responding to our thoughts, it's responding to our habit of vibration, and it will come in and support, it will make a way when you're willing to allow it, then you can let go and let God, right? So that's the Michael Singer piece of surrender. Difficult to surrender if you don't understand that we live in an intelligent system that's always responding to your thoughts, creating coincidences, creating synchronicities. You really are creating your own reality. Difficult to let go and let God if you don't understand that. But if you get that there is an infinite intelligence functioning in our life that's always working for our greatest growth, our greatest prosperity, and our greatest evolution, again, going back to that idea that anytime you're operating from a primal state, it's because you're giving a meaning to an experience that is out of alignment with that idea. And then you can start to actually integrate and practice that through surrender. You can create miracles in your life, or rather you can allow the great miracle maker to create miracles in your life. Now, Neville Goddard was the third piece of this Amazon book review that inspired this whole episode. Neville brought another piece of this conversation, which is the fourth dimension. Neville said, look, everything, there's two different realities that are taking place simultaneously. One reality is what we normally exclusively refer to as our reality. He calls it the five sensory reality, the material reality. What we see, what we smell, what we hear, what we taste, what we touch. He says that reality is actually an effect of another root cause reality called the fourth dimension. And he said the fourth dimension is a reality of imagination. It's a reality of waveform vibration. It's a reality of potential. And it is actually where all ideas already exist. All of creation already exists in the fourth dimension. And we activate or bring forth concepts, ideas, relationships, businesses, dreams, goals from this fourth dimension through the act of imagination. That as we are tuning into that which already exists in the fourth dimension, as we imagine, as we visualize, we're feeding our energy into that space and activating those thoughts and ideas. And I did an entire episode on this if you want to go deeper on fourth dimension called Create from the Fourth Dimension. But what Neville says is as we activate these ideas, the idea might be to find your soulmate. The idea might be to build $1 million business. The idea might be to change the educational system. Two things happen. One, you start to have more thoughts and ideas related to producing this outcome. I call that the internal mechanism. You actually start to become a channel for bringing this idea into a physical reality. Simultaneous to that, all of life, going back to what we just talked about with Michael Singer, right? This idea of an infinite intelligence, all of life now starts to activate other people, influence their subconscious mind, give them thoughts and ideas, line them up into timing and rendezvous and synchronicities and coincidences to support you in materializing whatever you've activated in the fourth dimension into the third dimensional space. He said the mistake that most people make is they get too entangled with the third dimension. You've got a circumstance or situation that you don't like in your life, like a health condition, and you try to change the health condition, or a political party, and you try to change the political party. He said, but that's like trying to change the scene on a movie screen. When you understand that everything that you're experiencing in the third dimensional space is actually just a syndication or a live stream coming from the fourth dimensional space, now you can start to work at a root cause level. So again, Neville understood that there were two realities. And when we imagine, we are creating from the fourth dimension. And what's interesting is that you're always imagining. When you're talking to yourself as you're driving from point A to point B, you're imagining. When you get into an argument with your spouse or significant other or somebody at work and you walk away and you're still arguing with them, you're imagining. When you get really excited about a new business idea or a potential your dream home, you're imagining. You are nearly always imagining. And so some people say, but wait a minute, if everything that I'm creating in my reality is actually coming from this fourth dimensional space, and as I give attention to the fourth dimensional space, I start having thoughts and ideas to make this thing real, and then life is orchestrating and organizing all the cooperative components through other people and coincidences and synchronicities, why do I keep experiencing the same challenges over and over and over again in my life? And the answer is because you keep having the same inner dialogue. You keep imagining the same thing that you don't want. And so you're directing your mental attention towards what you don't want rather than what you do want. And so again, this goes back to the idea, and this is how all these pieces come together, of that when you realize that the state that you're operating from is important, and you use that as an opportunity to learn how to become more aware of your inner dialogue, and you have the tools to transform your habit of thought and your habit of emotion, you no longer have to consistently shift from a primal state to a powerful state. You just start to more naturally operate from a powerful state. And when you realize that the challenges that you're having in your life or the problems that you can't solve aren't yours to solve, and instead you can surrender them to a system or an intelligence that is able to do things that you're not able to do for yourself, you conserve even more energy. And now in all that conservation of energy, as you begin to relax into life, as you're surrendering and allowing life to be a co-creative partner with you, and as you're working at a root cause level of actually changing the way that you think and rewiring your brain so that you naturally have a different habit of thought and habit of emotion, you now have the space to start dreaming again. You start imagining again in a productive way. You can't do that when you're operating from survival and fear of financial insecurity and always comparing yourself with other people, or not understanding how the system works and thinking that you have to control everything or do everything perfectly or have the perfect plan. There's no space for you to create something new in the fourth dimension. So all of this is very much interrelated. And that's actually the work that we take people through systematically. Number one, let's heal what needs to be healed. Let's identify the limiting beliefs that were formed at a very early age that are ready to be transformed because you want to have a different life. And your thoughts really do become things, and you really are creating your reality. So let's identify those limiting beliefs and get you trained to operate more consistently from a powerful state. Number two, start understanding how the system works. Everything is not up to you. There's a greater force here, a higher power, a God or a universe that is also creating with you. And then number three, in that new understanding and in that new retraining, you're able to open up the space to imagine more freely and to start creating change in your life. It's really not that complicated when you have a roadmap. We've got a ton of resources for you. I highly encourage you to check them out. Jump over to the David Bear website. I've got free trainings, videos. Check out other episodes on this podcast. But again, just know this. Whatever it is that you dream of, it's possible. If you've got the right tools, you've got the right resources, and I guess if you've got the right three-headed mentor who can start to explain these concepts to you in a digestible, integratable way, and to start to weave them together into frameworks for you to have a powerful living experience. So I know we covered a lot in this episode, but I hope it was helpful for you. Do me a favor, if you're listening on YouTube, drop me a comment, a question. What's a big takeaway that you had? I try to read all the comments. If you're listening on the audio platforms and you love this episode, please, please, please leave me a rating. That's the way we can get this work out to more people. Feel free to share this episode with somebody who you feel like needs to hear it. And again, as always, I'm in it with you. We are doing this work together. This is not a do-it-yourself project. This is a do-it-with you. And I will see you in the next episode. Hey, it's David. Hop on over to davidbear.com. Click right here. There's also a link in the show notes, and sign up for our newsletter. You'll get immediate access to my free Mind Hack ebook, as well as a couple of trainings to help you master the inner game. This is a great way to stay informed and be a part of our community and be notified of special announcements. Click below, head on over to the website, get subscribed. If you loved this video, make sure you check out this one or this one, and I will see you in the next video.